Hello, come in. Come in. Oh, hi, nice to see you. So it's been a bit of a while, been an amazing, busy week, but we've come to a Friday and I'm in, so that's nice. Good to see you. Well, you may have noticed as you were coming down the corridor, great boxes and pictures stacked everywhere and books and things, and we're having a yard sale today because we're having to downsize. But we're still unearthing treasures, some of which we may have to let go, but some of which we'll definitely keep. And of course, the great distraction because you stop and read them. And one of the treasures, I don't find it here. This I'd forgotten on just the tactile experience. How much this particular book meant to me. It's lost its spine, but it is one. I don't know if you can see on the cover here, sort of embossed into the cover. There's this beautiful, beautiful fairy maiden lifting her hands up in a great gesture. And this is this is an original, of course, of one of the original set of the Andrew Lang fairy books, the coloured fairy books. We had this one, which was the one that actually found its way into my room as a little boy, and which I used to look at the pictures of until one of them started to give me nightmares, and Mum said I shouldn't have it in my room, but I needed to hear the story. And eventually, of course, I came back to the book, and because so many of the pictures are so beautiful as well. But it was the world of the marvellous and the numinous for me. And I had this since I was a very little boy. This book originally came out in, I think, 1893, although this particular edition is 1824 and would have been my mother's. She would have been 6 in 1924, which is the about how old I was when I got it. It's quite a frightening witch there. Anyway, the main thing about these are for me, were the astonishing, beautiful pictures. And I would often look at the pictures long before I'd read. There's a prince being turned into a swan. I look at the pictures as wonderful knight and his lady. I look at the pictures as dragon flying, taking off with people, long before I could read. And I would, as a giant, a herd boy, I kind of imagined the stories for myself quite often before I read the books, before I actually read the stories. But I remember, well, I'll see if I can find it. I'm almost frightened to turn the page. The story that gave me nightmares was this. I don't want to give you nightmares as well. The Witch in the Stone Boat. Now, this is a very hideous witch getting on board a ship, and there's the poor maiden and her defenceless baby. The witch comes on board, and this boat, this solid stone in the boat not floating, it somehow got mixed up in my mind with the stories my mother used to tell about how you should break the bottom of the eggshells in your when you'd finished eating your boiled egg as a child, because if you didn't stove out the bottom of the eggshell, the witches would take them and turn them into boats and go out and sink the poor sailors. And of course, when I was very little, I didn't quite know how much of these things were story and how much of them might be real things. But I have to say, religiously broken the bottom of my eggshells ever since. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you one story in particular, which I begged my mother to read to me because I found the pictures so intriguing, and which she did, and eventually I learned to read for myself. And the first picture in this story, The Dragon of the North, Lang, and in fact, I have to say, although they're all published by Andrew Lang, it was a bit unfair because a great deal of the work and translation and retelling was done by Andrew's brilliant wife, Leonora. And really, it should have been Andrew and Leonora Lang. And later she did publish things of her own under the name Mrs. Lang. I'm surprised that Andrew did that because, of course, the stories are full of powerful, magical women who don't take kindly to being slighted. And indeed, that's the story here. So the first picture I saw in this story, I loved this picture. I can't tell you how, with these two birds who turn out to be guides and talking birds, who've in fact guided the young hero, the young man, to where the witch maiden is under a tree. And the witch maiden is very beautiful, and she's a kind of ambivalent figure. He's told she's a witch maiden, and he ends up wronging her, but actually you wonder whether, they might not have been. Anyway, it's a lovely thing. So he sees her eventually Mum read this to me, and then I read it myself, and she comes to bathe her face in a pool in the moonlight in this wood. And so without seeming to notice anything, she went to the spring, looked up to the full moon, then knelt down and bathed her face 9 times, then looked up to the moon again, and walking 9 times round the well as she walked, she sang this song. Full-faced moon with light unshaded, let my beauty ne'er be faded, never let my cheek grow pale, while the moon is waning nightly, may the maiden bloom more brightly, may her freshness never fail. It's magical. Anyway, she rebukes the young man for having sat there while she bathed her face, and threatens to punish him, and he answers, I wonder how to respond in these awkward situations. The youth answered humbly, "Forgive me, beautiful maiden, if I have unintentionally offended you. I chanced to come here after long wandering and found a good place to sleep under this tree. At your coming I did not know what to do, but stayed where I was, because I thought my silent watching would not offend you." Well, it did offend her, and of course it's a great classical trope here of, you know, the goddess of the moon, and, you know, you think of the classical myths and Diana and Actaeon. It's just extraordinary. But this is not from the Greek classical world. This is from the north, the far north. This is a Finnish tale. Anyway, eventually I got to read the story, which is extraordinary, and it's great. It's actually a story, as the title, The Dragon on North, suggests, about how a young man overcomes a dragon. But he's told by a magician that in order to do so, he needs a magic ring, but not just any magic ring, but the magic ring of King Solomon. And the magician helps him to understand the language of birds, and these 2 birds guide him to the wood because they say the witch maiden has the ring. And eventually he gets her to show him the ring and all the different things it can do, and it does different things according to which finger you put it on, and it's got lovely lettering on it, which she doesn't know. She doesn't understand the full power of the ring, but she uses it to make her magic palace. And one of the things lets you fly like a bird, and the other lets you be invisible. And they try it out. She lets him try it out. She's by this time asked him to stay with her and live with her forever, and he asks if he can have time to think about it. But the birds tell him that they must never do this, and that one thing he must never do is give her blood, because she's going to take his blood and use it to captivate his soul. And of course she offers him a life of bliss with her in return for 3 drops of blood. And he says, "Give me time to think." And then he asks her to show him if he can use the ring. And of course, as soon as he has the ring, he puts it on the finger that allows him to fly like a bird, and he lifts up and she sees him go, and he makes himself invisible. And then with the help of the ring, he overcomes the dragon, and is offered the hand of the princess of the kingdom, and he becomes a prince, and the old king dies, and he becomes the king. But of course, meantime, he's left this witch maiden from whom he's stolen the ring, and she eventually finds out where he is and turns herself into a bird, and he turns himself into a bird, and of course she comes and finds him. She sees that there's a bird with a ring round its neck on a ribbon, and she recaptures him. That's him slaying the dragon. I love that one. That was pretty amazing. But then, I saw these pictures. Then she recaptures him and she chains him to a rock, and it's going to leave him there forever. This has got torn over the period of time. And eventually, this is the end of the story, eventually the magician who first helped him to understand the birds finds out where he is and comes and rescues him and takes him back to his kingdom and his wife and the life that he was living before. But of course, she's got the ring back. It's a rather strange ending, it says. "So after his long suffering came prosperity, which lasted to the end of his life. But he never got back the magic ring, nor has it ever been seen by mortal eyes." And you think that'd be the end of the story. But whether it was Andrew Lang or Mrs. Lang wrote at the end, "Now, if you had been the prince, would you not rather have stayed with the pretty witch maiden?" It's just left as an open question, all these jumps. But there was something about, particularly that first picture of the woods and the pool and the young man. Of course, that image of the young man with his back to the tree and the maiden and the woods and the pool comes up again in the George MacDonald book, Fantastes, that I was reading you. But this was just the opposite of those sentimental, prettified, rinky-dinky little Dingley Dell fairy books for children's where the fairies are all diminutive and there's no real danger and it's all rather sentimental. And Andrew Lang really disliked those books. And of course, when Tolkien writes his great essay on fairy stories, he praises Lang and says we've got to redeem this magical, strange, perilous realm of fairy, which tells us all about choice and about awe and about consequence. We have to redeem it from the kind of the prettifying kind of Dingley Dell stories. So there, I'm going to really enjoy. Look, this is amazing. There's the story of King Frost. What a picture of winter, and as it were, the maiden spring. You know, I mean, these are really profound and powerful things. And as you can see, you know, my mother loved and wore this book to bits when she was a little girl, and then passed it on to me, and I've loved and worn it to bits too. And now here am I, a man in my 60s, as deeply moved by these stories as ever I was when I was young. It's extraordinary, the power of fairy tale. Anyway, lovely to see you.